Great, thank you very much.
And you're free to start anytime, Your Worship.
Great, thank you very much, Doug. I hereby call the Governance and Priorities Committee for the City of Lloydminster to order for Monday, May 11th, 2020. At this time, we will take a silent moment of personal reflection. As a reminder, all members of council are obligated to declare a conflict of interest or a pecuniary interest as per section 133 of the Lloydminster Charter regarding any item on this agenda. This meeting is for discussion and information gathering only. All decisions will occur during regular council meetings. We thank all of our presenters at this time for their time presenting today. Moving on to item number 2 of the agenda. I will look for council's recommendation or on the agenda presented before us. Councillor Buckingham.
Move the agenda dated May 11th, 2020 be approved.
Thank you. Seconder. Councillor Fagnan, thank you very much. Any further discussion before I call for the question? Not seeing any. All in favor, please raise your hand.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Opposed? Carried. Moving on to item number 3. Approval of previous meeting minutes. I'll look for direction from council. Councillor Buckingham.
I move that the Governance and Priorities Committee meeting minutes dated April 14th, 2020 be approved.
Thank you. Seconder. Councillor Monroe, thank you very much. Any further discussion on those minutes? Not seeing any. I'll call for the question. All in favor, please raise your hand.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Opposed? And carried. Moving on to item number 4, public presentations. I see none listed, so I will move to item number 5, administrative reports, city manager.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council. To present 5.1 2020 quarter 1 procurement activity, I'll ask Mika Wangler to present.
Good afternoon, Mika.
Your Worship and Council.
Great.
I am presenting the first quarter of 2020's procurement activity report. This is to provide the committee with the 2020 quarter 1 procurement activity. So section 8.2 of the procurement and purchasing policy requires that the activity be reported to council on a quarterly basis. And the options are that the committee accept this report as information, or that the committee requests more information and that the item be brought forward to a future Governance and Priorities Committee meeting. This is in alignment with the following strategic area: open and responsive government, to disclose administration and council approved projects for transparency. The report is in compliance with the procurement and purchasing policy. So I have a report attached. And it is broken down by different departments, and I won't be going through reading over all of it, but I'll give you guys a couple minutes to review, and if anyone has questions, please let me know.
Mika, if I could start, as you can see, some fell in the preview of council's required approval due to over $200,000, I believe, and the remainder, and basically the report I'm viewing, were all less than $200,000. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes. And these contracts are, the report includes awards that are $75,000 and above, which is
All right.
in compliance with our policy.
Thank you. Any questions of council of administration? I suspect these projects will lead to several other projects, Mika, as I look at engineering type work being done and having been awarded. We'll see a lot more stuff come forward very soon.
That's correct, yes.
Terrific. Any other, Councillor Diachuk?
Yeah, thanks, Worship. The only observation I guess I was thinking is that it seemed pretty skinny in terms of, I think, what we've seen in previous years. So am I accurate in perceiving it that way?
We thank you, Councillor Diachuk. We did have a, I guess I don't want to name it, but a couple projects that were maybe delayed or just pushed back.
Okay.
COVID related or not, they were just, we decided not to go forward with them in the first quarter, but I think we're seeing them go ahead now. So,
okay.
Yeah, for different reasons, projects were just put on hold.
Yeah, I just had the sense, and I was reading it, that when last year when we're doing this, or years prior when we had reports, we had a little more activity. So I just assumed that, again, COVID was coming in the tail end of this as well. So there are a lot of good reasons why there wouldn't be many projects going forward. So.
I do want to bring up one initiative that engineering has that they have completed is they're trying to do some of their planning earlier on. So in the fourth quarter of last year, we had some the tendering phase of some projects go out for consultation work. So that's just to get ahead of the game for this year, but that doesn't affect the list in number wise, I guess, too drastically.
Any other questions for Mika? City Manager.
I just follow up on that. Councillor Diachuk's comment is that the plan is that we've gone through our list of projects for the 2020 budget, and when we did the revisions last week, all that was taken into consideration, and the plan is to move ahead with as many projects as possible that are approved within the budget. So that's our full intent for this year.
Any further questions or comments? Thank you very much, Mika. Appreciate the report and the great work that you're assisting our teams in procurement. You're very much appreciate the report coming forward to see what's been going on in the city. And we'll look forward to the second quarter when we see a lot more things happening, that's for sure.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council.
Thank you. Moving on to 5.2, I'll look to the City Manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. For 5.2, data center refresh and enterprise backup software replacement, I'll ask Paul Schweibes from IT to present.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council.
Good afternoon, Paul.
So the topic is to provide the committee with information on the data center refresh and enterprise backup software projects. The city currently has main IT server and storage infrastructure at 2 locations, City Hall being our production location and the Op Center being our backup location. The storage at City Hall and the servers and storage at the Op Center are now at the end of their useful life. Typical useful life of servers are 3 years in production, and storage devices are 5 to 6 years. Our current servers in production were installed in 2017, and the storage devices at City Hall and the Operations Center were installed in 2012 and 2014, respectively. The 2012 storage device was initially installed at City Hall and then moved to the Op Center in 2014 when it was constructed. As well, our current backup solution is not meeting our requirements in terms of stability, reliability, desired backup retention length, and the ability to complete backups within our backup window. This increases our risk for business continuity in the event of a system failure or a ransomware incident. The current solution also requires an extra amount of manual effort in monitoring to ensure we maintain current backups. The replacement of servers and storage infrastructure aligns with backup and recovery, and therefore we have combined these projects into one request for proposal. The primary goals of this project are, there's three of them. So the first one is the replacement of hardware that is end of life to ensure stability, reliability, and increased performance for city software applications. Second one is replacement of the backup software with an enterprise level solution that meets the city's needs in terms of stability, reliability, desired backup retention length, ability to complete backups within our backup window, and reduce daily administration. And the third goal is to improve the ability to recover IT systems and data quickly in the event of major issues with the IT infrastructure or data at City Hall, or a major ransomware incident in the environment. Backups are key to recovering quickly in these types of events, and the technology and software available today is vastly improved from when our current backup software was installed in 2012. We did issue an RFP back on February 27th with a closing date of March 23rd. We received 5 proposals, one of which did not meet the mandatory requirements, and we're currently reviewing and evaluating the proposals based on the criteria outlined in the RFP, and plan to present a recommendation at a future council meeting. I did include a little bit of a high-level diagram. It's really just intended to be a high-level diagram of the components that are included in the project. So we're replacing 3 servers at City Hall, as well as the storage at City Hall, storage device, redeploying 2 existing servers from City Hall to the Ops Center, where they will have a bit of life left for the backup center, replacing the storage at the Operations Center, as well as the backup software and the backup storage device. And the data will also be replicated between the storage devices at City Hall and the Ops Center, which will greatly improve our backup and recovery resilience. The objective is to provide the committee with relevant information on the RFP issued by the city for the requirements of the data center refresh and enterprise backup software projects. The 3 options, the recommended option is the first one, that committee accept this report as information and that the item be brought forward to a future regular council meeting for decision. Option 2, committee requests more information and that it be brought forward to a future council meeting. Or option 3, request more information and that the item be brought forward to a GPC meeting. Strategic plan, this item is in alignment with the following strategic area: open and responsive government. The replacement of the infrastructure and backup software will ensure the City of Lloydminster has a stable and reliable computing environment. And the budget implications, the 2020 capital budget included $300,000 for data center refresh and $50,000 for the enterprise backup software. So I'll pass it back to you, Your Worship, for any questions.
Thank you very much, Paul. Questions or comments for Paul regarding the information presented? Councillor Baker, I've got you first, and followed by Councillor Torson.
Thank you, Richard. Just because I don't understand, and I want to understand, Paul, is this a capacity thing or a mechanical thing? It sounds like it's a capacity thing. Is that right?
Well, thank you, Councillor Baker. The primary goal, or I'll say the primary reason, is because these devices that run the servers and storage that run our main municipal applications are at the end of life, and so that's the primary goal. And then as we refresh these devices, it also brings in the opportunity to increase our backup and recovery resilience, because technology has changed in the last number, since 2012 when we first put these devices in.
Councillor Baker.
Does that answer your question?
Well, it does, but just a follow-up question. The layman's terms, we say that they're at the end of life. I'm just thinking, when people ask us, why did you guys buy these servers? And for a layman, what do you say? Like, they're end of life. Now, what does that mean? I know what end of life means, but
Well, okay,
how does
so
that apply to the server? You know, is it overloaded? Is it the technology is no good, or what? How do we give an answer on that? Just that's where I'm coming from. Hope you can
Okay.
appreciate that.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Paul.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. So for the storage devices, I guess, really all of hardware, the vendors, whether it be HP or Dell or IBM, Cisco, they all support, you know, their hardware for a period of time. They can, you know, they'll give replacement parts, they'll service it, they'll update it, and we've used that time up basically. For the storage device at the operations center, the one we put in 2012, we're not, so from the vendor, we're not able to even buy warranty or support past the end of 2020. So if we run that device past the end of 2020, and we run into a hardware error or anything like that, we won't be able to phone the vendor and get assistance. So,
Okay.
you know, like they only support them for a certain number of years.
May I ask this question? When you're bidding, they bid on this work. Do they tell you at that time how long they support their hardware and provide service?
Yes, they do. Yeah, generally, okay. And so at the start there, I generally outlined servers in production would be recommended of 3 years, and storage devices are 5 to 6 years. And so what we typically do is for the servers in production, we'll replace them every 3 years, so that we're always running, you know, for our production workload, we're always running new and supported servers. Then we move those and redeploy them from the production environment over to our backup environment, because and get another 3 years worth of life out of them is the idea.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Worship. I understand it now. That I just need an answer if people ask.
Absolutely, Councillor Baker. Councillor Thorson, I think you're next up.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. So a couple things. One is, like, as far as the kind of things that these are these running like traffic lights? Are they running things for the water treatment plant? Different things like that? Or is this just more like the drives for the computer system at the city, like just where files are stored?
Thank you, Councillor Thorson. So it's kind of a combination. So it runs our main municipal applications, like Diamond. So the applications that create our utility bills, our property taxes, do cash receipting, financial applications, all of that. So all of those type of applications, as well as for the storage, it stores our our file data.
Right. So I guess what I was trying to pull out of there was, you know, really on the things like traffic lights and stuff like that, like how much of this is really like the backbone of what runs our cities, or more on like the operations of kind of the data of, we'll say, all the different departments? You know what I mean? Like, is this like the backbone to make everything work? Just out of curiosity.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
This is our main server environment that it makes everything work, I guess, to put it that way.
That's where the argument to me, because it could be a challenge, because different organizations and different companies, different things will have a different standard for what they accept as useful life for what they'll hold on to. And depending on the, you know, the risk and things like that involved of the devices that you're using and what they're actually performing in terms of a service may inform whether or not you have a 3-year replacement life or a 5-year or whatever the case is. But, you know, based on how essential some of these things are for our city to just operate on a daily basis, it's critical that we stay with these replacement timelines, regardless of what's happening in economies and things like that, that you have to stay true to and be committed to some of these things. Otherwise, the disaster for your disaster recovery plan could be pretty big if you lost a server environment for something that runs things as critical as water or traffic lights or something like that.
Yes, that is correct. This environment, like the 3 production servers at City Hall and that storage device, that is where the majority of our applications that we run on premise, like the traffic lights, like our utility billing, property tax, financial software, all of that stuff, that's where that runs.
And that's why, to me, like I realize that, you know, this is for the purpose of information, that some of these things are so key and critical that they need to be working all the time. So replacement of these things is absolutely critical to happen on a regular basis, and minimal to no interruption of any of these services, because it can be critical to the health and safety of the community to have these things working properly. So, you know, I appreciate what you guys are doing here. And, you know, I had one question other than this, and it's just kind of about, you know, our strategy as far as storage and backup and things like that, just because, you know, we will be buying some new things. And as far as I know about IT in the industry, as everything is moving from a on-premise model to the cloud and subscription-based models. So, you know, the whole thing behind a subscription-based model is your fee that you pay, more or less, it pays for the capital portion as well as the service itself. So, you know, it's kind of an all-in price of everything going into the cloud, and you're using their servers to store your data. Is that an option we have pursued but decided against it because of our specific needs?
Yes, thanks, Councillor Torson. So in the RFP, we put out that our primary environment, we wanted that to run on premise, because all of our applications are, that's how they're currently built, I'll say. But we left it open as far as for our backup environment. We left the vendors to submit kind of their proposals, you know, different options for potentially cloud storage and things like that. And so we did leave that open. The diagram that I put here is just kind of a potential of what we had planned. So we are reviewing those the submissions, and you know, the vendor that we go with may include the options for cloud in the future.
Yeah, like, because cloud has its own benefits and things like that, don't get me wrong, and it really, you're the expert on the subject, but you know, some of those benefits be if you run into a disaster and need to recover because there was a fire or something in a building, you don't have to worry about your server being destroyed in the fire, and you can download from the cloud everything that would have been backed up.
Yes, that's correct. And I mean, we currently do have some applications in the cloud, like all of our Office 365, all of our email is hosted in the cloud. We are starting to use SharePoint and moving some of our user data there as well as a few of our applications, eScribe being one of them. It's kind of dependent on, you know, the application or the vendor that supplies the application as to whether they're cloud or not. But we do have some applications and data currently in the cloud, mostly Office 365.
Okay, well, at the end of the day, I trust that the IT team will provide the right recommendation and get the best pricing on the different options, and point us in the right direction, because as much as I sound like I know what I'm talking about to a certain extent, I pretty much exhausted my knowledge on the subject. So
I will say, out of the applications or the proposals that we received, they were very good proposals. So we have some good options to review and select. So that's good news.
Awesome.
Any other questions or comments? I believe, Paul, we look forward to you bringing that forward to council for a decision on on moving forward with keeping us current with our IT needs, because it's been said, it is the backbone of the operation at the end of the day, and we need to ensure that certainly with ransomware and things like that that are out there, that concerns me a great deal, having aware of other businesses in the community that fall into that. So from that perspective, Councillor Torson, I see you have a second comment.
Thank you, Your Worship. No, just it's kind of just generally on that topic, and I know I've mentioned it before, and I can't remember what the result of the conversation was, and I'm not asking for someone to remember what we had talked about before, but that you mentioned ransomware. There's something called cyber insurance that you can get, so it's like a cyber liability, and insurance providers are now offering it, saying that under certain parameters and circumstances, you can actually get insurance for some of these cyber crimes or issues that could happen to your network overall, where if you have some kind of business interruption because of it, or if they need, if you get ransomware kind of thing on your machine, they'll both provide you with the services to unlock everything and get you back in business, and also potentially pay your ransomware or something along those lines. So it's kind of interesting, but it's becoming more and more common, and you see it with something as simple as something like the city of Saskatoon, I think it was last year, that ended up paying or getting defrauded on some of these things. So it can happen anywhere. It's happened here. Grant McEwen was another one, and it's a scary thought that the scam artists have found a way to take away municipalities and other kind of organizations like ours. So it's happening, and we have to be careful with what we're doing.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions or comments? With that, thank you very much, Paul. I think we'll look forward to that coming forward to the next to a council meeting in the near future.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship and Council.
Moving on to agenda item 5.3, I'll look to the City Manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. For 5.3, quarter one financial statements for month ending March 31st, 2020. I'll ask the CFO, Denise McDonald, to present.
Good afternoon, Council.
Good afternoon, CFO.
I am here to present to the committee the first quarter financial statements for 2020. This is for your review. The statements cover the period of the 3 months beginning January 1st and ending March 31st. When I looked at my notes last year at this time for the first quarter report, I had mentioned to you that we were working on our processes to ensure that we would get the financial statements to you in a timely manner. And I'm happy to admit that, yes, we have a process in place, and we are able to close our books for the quarterly statements in order to prepare the financial statements. However, COVID has impacted us slightly, and so they are getting them a little later than what we had anticipated. But we, our finance team has worked really hard in presenting the financial statements for you, and we have formatted them in a way that we hope that you'll be happy with. And certainly we welcome any feedback you have that will make them even better from this. So with that, if we could go to the next slide. I have our report here, and the first portion on here, this is your balance sheet for March 31st. So the first column is the 3 months actual up to March 31st. The second column is the unaudited financial numbers as of December 31st, 2019, because we have not passed the audited financial statements yet. And then the last column are the numbers for March 31st, 2019. So a year ago today for comparative purposes. So I'm going to walk you through these. If you'll give me a chance to finish one page at a time, I'll look for your questions at the bottom of the page. So at the top, we have our cash is sitting at 19.3 million. So our cash is up from December 31st and a little bit down from last year. Part of that is because in the next line item, we have short-term investments that were down from December 31st. We had 24 million in short-term investments that matured. 10 million of that was reinvested in February, and additional 10 million was invested in April 3rd outside the 3-month window. We also had additional cash inflow from revenues of 12 million. The average interest rate on those short-term investments is sitting at 2.62%, which we're happy to report to you that we have tried hard to ladder our investments to ensure that we have investments at 30, 60, and 90 days. And because of the wastewater treatment plant being in the window this year and next year, we have tried our best to keep most of our investments into short-term and some into long-terms. So the next item I'd like to bring to your attention is taxes receivable and grant and lose. So the 2.1 million there is related to taxes uncollected. So typically we have 2 million that remain uncollected. The people that do not pay every year are sitting there. It'll be interesting to see with our payment deferral program how much that increases at the end of 2020, but you can see between 19 and 20 it's pretty static. Trade and other receivables, we have 3.1 million sitting there. That's a little bit down from last year and down from December 31st. Sitting in those numbers, we have 678K in receivables, GST of 81,000, water receivables of 1.8 million, and 550,000 in unearned investment as of March 31st. The last number on there is the long-term investments, which I've already spoken a little bit to you about. Note that within there we have some longer-term investments sitting at 3 million to mature in 22, 5 million to mature in 2023, 2 million to mature in 2024 with an average interest rate of 3.16%. So the remainder of it is even though it's still sitting in long terms, it's due to mature within 2020 and 2021. If we go into our financial liabilities, we have accounts payable and accrued liabilities. We have 1.3 million in accounts payable plus 1.8 million in RCMP contracts accrued that we have not received an invoice for, so we're sitting and holding that payment. March 31st, the school owes the schools 650K for payment from the subsequent month to be paid in the subsequent month. So typically we collect taxes and then we remit them in the following month. And then the deferred revenue is sitting at 6.2, which is down from December 31st and a little bit up from last year at this time. And what's included in those numbers are 1.26 million in MSI grant, 4.86 in Alberta grants to be recognized as project expenses occur, 92,000 in unused gift certificates from the BioClean Aquatic Center, Lloyd Golf Curling Club, and the Service Sports Center. Employee benefit obligations, that's pay period 7 ending March 28th, and that will be paid in April 3rd. So that's just a timing thing. It also includes some vacation pay, voluntary vacation pay program that we have with the staff is included in that number. Deposit liabilities, mostly that's water deposits. So when people set up a water account, they have to make a deposit. That includes 667,000 of it. It also includes some other deposits meant for development agreements, as well as deposits for room rentals, etc. Oh, sorry, I jumped here. I missed a number here. Deposit liabilities. Well, that's what I did. I got your employee benefit obligations in the wrong order. So then I'll just skip down to long-term debt. You can see that we're at 630,000 long-term debt principal paid in the first quarter. And if we go to inventory for consumption under the non-financial assets, you can see that we're up from last year. And that's because we have a new item in there that we didn't have on the books before, and that's crushed concrete of $368,000. Under prepaid expenses, we have 89,000 prepaid P-card expenses, as well as 262,000 in IT licenses and subscriptions. 192,000 in other prepaid expenses, as well as deposit 10,000 in cylinder deposits, must be for the water treatment plant chemical. And then we have work in progress. So we have 4.7 million that was work that was carried forward into 2020 from 2019. And we have 1 million of work done in the first quarter. Then when we get to the accumulated surplus and reserves, those numbers are subject to change because we will record the true surplus when we have the year completed. So for now, those numbers will fluctuate just to balance the financial statements. And our reserves haven't changed from year end. So we're at the bottom of the balance sheet. So if there's any questions there. No?
Any
Okay,
questions of
so
council?
we'll go to the income statement Okay, so the next page is the income statement. If we can move the slide down one page. And it's income statement by objects. So you'll see the net municipal taxes there. That's our pre-authorized payment program. And it's sitting at 2.1, and that number is exclusive of the school portion. Our pre-authorized payment program is actually up this year in comparison to the previous year. And so we have a little bit of in the prior year that we reported there, we have included some of the schools, so they're not very good comparable numbers on there. So I apologize for that. You'll see that we've split this financial statement up between the current year and the prior year, so that you can see the 2020 actuals, the 2020 budget, and then the prior year for comparative purposes. Under user fees, we're sitting at 21%. So at the first quarter, of course, that should be 25%. So you can see that the daily user fees ceased at the recreation facilities as of March 16th due to COVID-19, and refunds were issued for a number of facilities. Total refunds within the first quarter were $71,000, and you'll see a further $31,000 in quarter two. Under government transfers, it's slightly up from last year in our operating. We wanted to make note that to council that the revenue sharing program from the province of Saskatchewan will come out in the second quarter. And instead of paying on a monthly basis, we've heard that they plan to pay it all at once on June 1st. So that'll be nice influx for the cash flow purposes. Penalties and cost of taxes is sitting at $251,000. That's at 18%, slightly higher than last year. And it includes 40,000 higher in penalties. Photo radar is down slightly, as well as the RCMP fines are recorded under penalties and costs there. So our numbers have been increased due to penalties on taxes and arrears. The licenses and permits portion, so that's our business licenses. Business licenses are sitting at 533,000 or 96%. And we are at this point, we're short about 40,000 K. We typically expect an additional 47,000 throughout the summer for temporary licenses issued for the remainder of the year or any new businesses operating. So it'll be interesting what happens to that number as we progress here. Franchise and concession fees. So that's our franchise on electricity and natural gas providers. At this point, we are 90,000 higher than last year. So that's a good sign. And we're sitting at 20%. Those usually come in a month later than the month itself, and so it catches up in December. Investment income is slightly higher than last year at this point, and we're sitting at 29%. The other numbers, so when we look at salaries, wages, and benefits, so we're sitting below budget at 20% versus 25%. And there's a number of reasons why. We have multiple positions that were partially vacant, COVID layoffs of casual and part-time staff that occurred in March and will take effect April 1st as we start to realize the cost savings of that in Q2. Contracted services are sitting at 19%, and they may be realized due to facility closures of COVID-19. So if we're down from 2019 by $405,000. Goods and materials are sitting at 19%. Transfers to other local boards and agencies. So there's a number of transfers that we make for a number of our nonprofits, and what we did with them this year for consistency and reduced administration was move them into a monthly payment plan. So when you compare them to last year, you can see that it's lower, but it's because we've set them up on automated payment plans. The other items were not significant when I looked at the utilities. The utilities are below the quarterly percentage. We're sitting at $1,075,000, which is slightly higher, but not a significant amount. And overall, we're still under budget. Then if we could get to the next page, unless there's questions on that.
Any questions, Council?
The next page shows the income statement by department. So our general government includes, this is our pre-authorized payment program again, as well as our franchise fees. Protective services are sitting at 9%, and so that's our revenues under photo radar, fines, anything from the protective services area. Environmental services, so that includes water, wastewater, solid waste, that's sitting at 22%. Though it is slightly down from last year, and it was due to, we have some billings that we have yet to post to the financials. So we'll have to work on those numbers. Public health and welfare. So public health and welfare, that's the revenues are related to SAS lottery grants, which we expected in the first quarter, but we didn't get them until the second quarter. FCSS grant received was in the first quarter for $116,000, and taxi vouchers sold in the first quarter were $24,000. Planning and development, you can see, is sitting at 9%. Not too much activity at this time, though we did get some joint regional growth study grant was received in the first quarter for $123,000, and development permits of $24,000. Under rec and culture, we're sitting at 21%. Daily user fees ceased at the rec facilities on March 16th due to COVID-19, and so that's impacting there slightly. And then we have the refunds that I mentioned earlier. I think you will see more material impacts of the COVID-19 in Q2. Under expenditures for general government, so that includes the majority of our administrative costs for council, admin, ledge services, IT, property assessment and taxation, safety, employee relations, etc. And it's sitting below budget at 11%. Protective services are sitting at 22%, and that includes police, fire, emergency management, and public safety. Transportation services are sitting at 16%. Environmental services are sitting at 15%. And rec and culture on the bottom is sitting at 20%. On the next page, unless there's questions.
Any questions,
One with me,
Council?
Your Worship.
Councillor Buckingham.
Yep.
Please, go ahead.
So, thank you, Your Worship. It would appear that our protective services revenue budget is going to come in really short if that's the first 3 months of the year. Is that a fair statement at 9% in the first 3 months?
I can comment on that, Councillor. Normally, normally the protective services budget sees most of its fine revenue through photo radar into the warmer days of summer. I would agree with you that it will be impacted. We've seen considerably less traffic flows through the COVID period. So I would say, yes, you're correct. But the lower revenue at this point is usually indicative of the shorter enforcement type of day in the winter months, the ability to use the photo radar vehicles or in the RCMP at that time.
So basically, when you see a number like that, you have a contingency plan in place. You've got some ideas on how we're gonna get there.
I'm not sure what the question is, or what's the contingency for the lower numbers?
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, we'll have to see what rebounds as we reopen and what happens with our revenue, with our photo enforcement and with our enforcement through the COVID period and onward into the reopening to see what happens. We have seen higher traffic revenues or traffic flows just recently, but we're still waiting to see how that will be impacted through enforcement.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Torreson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Sorry if I was shaking my head there. I was just thinking of all things, like, yeah, there may be some metric we could look at to see, like, you know, how many days were we actually kind of out and about and actually providing photo enforcement services, and try and use that as some sort of comparator when we look at the cost to the overall revenue. But I would make an argument that being low on revenue for photo enforcement is the best problem to have, because that means that it's working. It's one of those things where you're making the argument that it's not a cash grab. Well, if it's not a cash grab, then we shouldn't worry about trying to increase that number by any means. I understand we have a budget, we're trying to balance it and everything. But the reality is the fewer numbers of tickets, assuming that the number of days in service is the same and everything, and traffic flows, whatever, means that people are not driving and speeding as much. Therefore, you have safer communities, safer streets. And if ever there was a number where you would be hopeful to be under budget on revenue, that is the one. Just my opinion. Anyway, thank you.
Councillor Buckingham.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. It's exactly what I was fishing for. You know, you see it out there. People are saying, why is the city doing this, and why is the city doing that, and why is traffic enforcement happening? And it's out there, right? But like Councillor Torreson said, it's a great thing if that's the number, because it does speak to the safer community as well. So it's a really good thing. I wasn't trying to say that we should be out there doing more. It's a really good thing. When you see a number like that, it's interesting to see what's being said, right? So what I was looking for really was, we're not out there just trying to grab cash, as some people might think.
Thank you,
Councillor
Councillor.
Baker. Go ahead, Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Your Worship. When photo radar was introduced into the city, the push behind it was safety, not money, safety. And I know that Director Doug was there at the time, and the city at the time was really concerned about safety because of too many speeders. And if we've reduced those speeders, I guess we've achieved what we wanted to do. We have RCMP, and if they're not really busy, that's probably a good thing, because they're not chasing down criminals, and maybe there's none of that happening in our community. I just use that as an example, but the idea was it was all about safety, and that's where we should be thinking. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. I think
Thanks for the questions. If I can just add to that, when you compare it to the previous year, we're not far off from last year, as well as there's a 1 month delay in recognizing that ticket and fine revenue. So it's perhaps not a bad position to be in anyway. The next page on there is a comparative of our capital projects to date. So on the first portion, you'll see the 2020 budget, that we have 8 projects that are complete, 98 in progress for total expenditures of $1,088,433. When you look at the projects completed last year at the same time frame, we had 6 projects that were complete, 33 that were started, and we had $3,674,704. So we had a number of projects that were completed in that first quarter. I think COVID has delayed a few of our projects, so we had a difficult time getting them going forward, but we should be in a good position going forward now. Other than that, I've just listed the detailed capital projects so you can see individually which capital projects are moving forward and have expenditures totaling that $1 million to date. Other than that, I give it back to the mayor for questions and or input on how we can present it better to you in the next quarter.
Thank you, CFO. Councillor Torreson.
Just to be clear, to make sure that I heard correctly. So where it says 2019 budget for the capital portion, that is when we were at this point last year?
Yes.
Or is that what's still left from last year?
No, it's work done in the first quarter. I did verify it this morning that it was work that we completed in the first quarter, 3.6 million.
Okay. Gotcha. That was the part that concerned me the most, and now that I understand what I'm looking at, I'm less concerned. Just a general comment over presentation and everything else. One is I like it. I think it's very clear, and I think that I think the finance team and the CFO's kind of explanation of what's happening everywhere is really great. There was a time while we were on council where I felt as though council was flying blind and we didn't exactly know where we were at. We're not there anymore, and just seeing the way you've presented this and hearing the information makes me feel like we have a much stronger, like 100 times stronger handle on our financial situation than we ever had before. So I really appreciate all of this work going into it. And I know when you're on working from home and different things, there's challenges to get these things closed and get them done, and the deadlines don't necessarily change. But you know, and there's still the same amount of work or more, and doing that while you're doing audit at the same time is going to be a huge challenge. So I'm really impressed with what I'm seeing. And one more thing is just as far as looking at, although they're the unaudited financial numbers, I think that's about the strongest our balance sheet's ever been. And it's going to be hard to watch what happens over the next year to that, because it's not going to stay in a position that it was in there. But you know, just it's really good to see that some of our strategies did there was some benefit to what we've done over the past few years, and we got to a certain point. We will not be able to keep it looking like that over the next year based on, you know, all the challenges we're facing now. But just, you know, thank you for all your great advice, I guess, and to help us get to where we were at one point, which we're no longer at.
Well, thank you. I think we've got a pretty good team in finance. We're working really hard on changing things and presenting things differently and being transparent. We are working on some cash flows. There's a number from a number of different areas, not only the IMT, but for our line of credit, we need to start working on our cash flows, and of course, budget will be right around the corner. So we will be getting you more information as we prepare it. So stay tuned.
Yeah, thank you. And that's going to be a challenge because I could tell you to do a cash flow projection in a scenario like this is
Very difficult.
incredibly challenging, and it's like throwing mud at the wall, and you're not sure if you want to go with the worst case scenario or something worse than what you imagine the worst case scenario to be, because that could be the scenario you're in. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions or comments regarding the financial statement for quarterly? Well, I certainly appreciate CFO you bringing it forward. I know you've highlighted the one area I always look at is the long-term debt, and I believe that was noted that it is decreasing as we make payments, and that will again increase accordingly when we get to the wastewater treatment plant and other projects. So it's always one that is always on my mind from that perspective, because we do have to pay the bills every day, but we also have to ensure that we manage the long-term debt that was referred to earlier today, and how important that we need to ensure that the credit worthiness and the stability, the financial stability of this city is in as good a shape as we can leave it going into the fall. And I think that's very evident here, and I appreciate the numbers on the financial report. And next year will be a different story, but that'll be starting the process one more time next year for the new council as they move forward. So any other comments? Thank you very much for your report, CFO. Moving on to the agenda then, to governance and priority matters. Item number 6, I look to the city manager for 6.1.
Thank you, Your Worship. For item 6.1, draft policy number 120-04, the appointments policy, I'll ask Chelsea Legacy to present.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council.
Good afternoon, Chelsea.
And I'm here to present you the new updated draft appointments policy. The city's current policy for appointments to boards and committees is outdated and requires extensive updates to provide a clear and transparent process for the appointments to ensure impartiality, accountability for those who serve. The appointments policy provides council and administration clear guidelines and transparent processes for all appointments. The policy outlines what categories council may establish committees in, all requirements for appointments of members of both council and administration, requirements for appointments to be done by resolution of council, and things that may be considered by council when making those appointments. This policy is to ensure legislative requirements are met and the potential for conflicts of interest or pecuniary interests are avoided. Our objective is to ensure a clear and transparent process for appointments for boards and committees. Options are that the committee recommend the appointments policy go forward to council for decision, that the committee recommend changes to the policy and it go forward to council for decision, or that the committee recommend changes to the appointments policy and that it come back to the committee for review. This item is in alignment with open and responsive government. The appointments policy ensures a fair and transparent process for all appointments. The governance implications, this policy would repeal the old outdated policy from 1983. And I will hand it over to you for any comments or questions.
Thank you, Chelsea. Questions or comments? Well, I certainly appreciate Chelsea and the Legislative Services team looking at this, because our council deals with a number of appointment requests and things like that on a regular basis. And I believe that having a newer, more up-to-date policy will help resolve some of those questions that are often faced in my office, the city clerk's office, and the city manager's office about appointing people to certain tasks and responsibilities. And I appreciate it, seeing it come forward as a draft for review today, and seeking council's input. But I think that it's very important that as council members, it's clear and concise, as we're often asked to be appointed to boards. There's times when we're asked to appoint individuals to boards within the city that serve our greater community outside City Hall. And I think these are all important steps that need to be done. And dating back from '83, that's a little time frame. I do remember back that far. So I'm glad that we're taking a kick at the cat here. So thank you so much for bringing that forward. I welcome any other comments from council. Councilor Torreson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I just have a
Councilor Torreson,
question,
I've got
and
you.
it's just on. Yeah, it's just on 5.5 of this policy. So, if a member of administration is appointed to a committee or a community board, council shall consider all of the criteria listed in section 5.4. And then the next one says section 5.4 or 5.4.7 does not apply. But then in the next line in 5.5.2, it shall take consideration into the potential for a real or perceived conflict of interest. So to me, when I read that, it's saying all of these things apply, except for the potential for a perceived or real pecuniary interest, except we should take into consideration the potential for a real or perceived conflict of interest.
Yes, thank you for your question, Councillor Torreson. The reasoning for that wording was based on pecuniary interest defined within the charter speaks only to members of council. So administration thought it was important to kind of split it out as a separate portion because a conflict of interest for administration is defined within the policy as the same as a pecuniary interest would be for members of council, but within the charter does not cover members of administration.
Okay, so it's making sure the language is clear between pecuniary interest and conflict of interest.
Yes, because
That's
if
what I'm
we were to
gathering, okay.
reference pecuniary interest, does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand why it is that way now. It just, I guess I wasn't
Okay.
following at the time because in my mind, I used those words relatively interchangeably, but when you explain that it's by definition in other documents, that it's more clear that that's why there would be a change in language from one to the other.
Absolutely. Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from council?
Other than, I think it's good to see, and I think that it's kind of necessary for us to put some borders around, when is a ABC agency board committee, when is it necessary and appropriate to have a member of council on it or a member of administration on it on behalf of the city. When is it appropriate and when are we doing it, and just kind of starting to put some guidelines around it, because in the past I just don't know that it was done that way, and you end up with individuals on boards where does really having a member of city council provide any benefit to the board or benefit to the city. So I think it's good just to take a sober second look at what we're doing and making sure that it follows the intent and is the best use of time for both those committees and for that member of council.
Absolutely.
Appreciate that, Councilor. Councilor Diachuk.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. I guess, I think if nothing else, what it does do is create a sense of consistency around appointments. So, there's a set criteria, I think, in the clause just before the one Councilor Torreson referenced. I think it's 5.4 is the one anyways, but says these are the elements to be taken into consideration. And I think what it does do is provide guidance every single time when you're going to make the appointment. So there's that consistency around it. And I think that's important because, if you only consider one thing one time and then a different thing another time, then you can wander away from, what the intended purposes of these committees are. But if you're consistent and looking at all those elements, by and large, I think you're going to make a lot better decision.
Thank you, Councilor Diachuk.
Yep.
Any further comments or questions? Not seeing any. Thank you very much, Chelsea, for bringing that forward, and we'll look forward to seeing it come back to council at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Moving on to agenda item 6.2, City Manager.
Thank you, Worship. For 6.2, draft policy number 630-01, land sales policy, I'll ask Dan Hobson to present.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council.
Good afternoon, Dan.
I'm here today to present Council with the draft land sales policy. Our current land sales policy was created in April 2014. You'll see the policy, it's the first document attached. It is a very procedural in nature policy, as well as it was also drafted during a time where land sales volumes were a little bit different than what we see today. So administration has reviewed the policy. We've provided our recommended policy attached to the second document. Largely, we've tried to speed up our processes and our reactions times and make the policy a lot simpler to read. One of the largest changes that we've proposed is the ability for administration to negotiate to an X set profit margin by council on both residential and commercial properties. What this largely would do is, while we would still go to council to set prices for land, they could be approved if council desired outside of council. So through administration internal processes, we could approve the sale of the lands. Moving forward, the plan, if this policy is adopted, is we would take the original policy, update that as needed, and bring that forward as procedures. They are quite detailed, and there's a lot of good information in there that's still relevant today. Ultimately, we're just trying to simplify policy moving forward.
Thank you, Dan. Questions or comments? Councilor Thorson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I see a lot of, like, I understand and agree with essentially everything in the policy and having that, you know, that direction on what needs to be done. And I agree and understand that the circumstances since the last time this policy was put in place in 2014 have changed considerably. So an update I absolutely think is necessary. One of the things I noted though is on things like proceeds. We talk about where the sales proceeds are going to go and things like that. One of the questions I have is, would it make sense to specifically say that we're going to do more or less offsites on our own lots that we sell? If that makes sense, like, you know, normally there's if a developer develops land, they do offsites, and then those offsites go into a specific reserve so that we ensure that the growth that's happened in our community, that those go into a specific account so we can pay for some long-term projects and things like that. But do we have to do that on our own sales? And if we don't, would it be appropriate to include that kind of language within a policy like this to ensure that when lot sales happen within the city, that at least a portion of those sales are going to the same place it would go if this were done by some private developer?
As we are today, we do include offsites in our development, so those costs are already accounted for separately through land division at the time of the development. So we're wholly treated like an external developer in that sense. As far as changing that model moving forward, that's something administration can absolutely review, and we can talk about the future of land division, how it looks that way.
Yeah. Keep in mind, I may not understand the process perfectly, that maybe if we're putting the stuff in the ground in a way, we're already doing some of that stuff, but then it's the access to the arterials and everything else that would be included in offsites. And I just want to make sure that what we're doing follows sound logic, so that let's say hypothetically the city from now on was the only developer in town. If you didn't do those things, then you would have nothing in your offsite bank to pay for all that growth and infrastructure and everything that, you know, those funds wouldn't necessarily be applied appropriately without the right parameters around how they ought to be used.
I believe Executive Manager Stan can answer or wishes to speak to that.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship and Councillor. It's standard practice that offsite levies are paid regardless whether it's City of Lloydminster doing the development or another developer. So those fees do get transferred into the appropriate reserves for those funds. And I do believe, and maybe this is the thing we need to go back and do some more digging on. I do believe that's been a practice for quite some time here as well.
So just the question is that a policy thing, or it was just by choice within the land division, or it's just something that's been done?
Yeah, it's usually paid upon when the lands are subdivided. So whether the city's been, subdivides the lot or another developer, those fees are collected upon subdivision, and would have been accounted for that in our accounting system. Or should have been. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I'm not suggesting that it hasn't happened. So I'm just wanting to make sure that, if we're playing land division and land developer, that we're playing by the same standards and set of rules that other people would be. And I think it also benefits the community in the long run to make sure that we have, those fully funded offsite reserves, so that when we have the growth, we have the ability to pay for it.
City manager.
Yeah, that's Don's correct on that. And so the offsites, before it gets to this policy, would already be included in our cost of land sold. The profits that we're talking here over and above that would go to the subdivision and land reserve, or the profits would be excess of offsites and whatever it costs to develop that parcel of land.
Okay. Thank you.
Officer Baker, I believe you had a comment.
Yes, Your Worship. Thank you. I'm quite honestly, I haven't had a chance to read this as well as I should, because I was committed. But I'm going to spend more time on it. But I have a question about the RFP and for selling off percentages of land, like blocks of land. The idea the city was in the land development business to provide lots for the individuals to build and small contractors to have land to build on. We went through a mess here about 4 years ago where a contractor insisted that he was going to buy several acres of industrial land and develop it. Those buildings are still sitting there framed up, and they've been that way for 3 or 4 years. And that's the mess you can get in when you sell off large blocks of your land. And I don't think that's right. And we got to decide why we're in and why we're developing land, and what was the purpose of developing land. Is it to see how fast we can sell it off to a big builder from somewhere, or is it to provide housing, property availability to local people that want to live here and build a home? And I think you got to be very careful with it. You could drive out in the industrial parks today and have a look, and you'll see those buildings sitting there rusting away. And what's ever going to happen to them? It's almost like an orphan oil well. So you better think strongly about that, Your Worship.
Appreciate that, Councilor Baker. And I believe that I had a chance to review this over the weekend, and I'll have to go back over it one more time. And I would certainly encourage you, when you have the opportunity, since you've been down this road a lot more than myself, and I believe some of the other councillors. But I think administration is quite aware of what's went on in the past. And like you say, 4 years ago, as Dan alluded to, this policy is in a little different position from when we were naming, I believe, mainly at selling house lots or residential lots at that time, and how we went from a bidding process and people were a lottery to now we would gladly have someone, we'd welcome anybody that would like to come in and chat with us about buying a city lot today. So we've seen a complete reversal of 180 degrees. And as you've outlined, Councillor Baker, that in the industrial side there, that plays a part into the puzzle as well. And we need to be very clear and concise with the direction we give administration going forward, so that we can avoid situations like that, because I think that's it's challenging for both the individuals that have made an investment, as well as other individuals that would like to make an investment. And that was some discussion some time ago. But you're right, policy does leading us to challenges if we're not careful. Absolutely. Any other comments or questions? So Dan, this will be coming back to council for approval of a policy is what the intention is from Land Division, correct?
That's correct, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Not missing anyone? Okay, thank you very much, Dan. Appreciate that for bringing that forward to us.
Thank you.
Moving on to agenda item number 7. I see inquiries from the media, and Eric, I'll recognize you now.
Thank you, Your Worship. And today we have interview request for yourself, Mayor Gerald Albers.
All right. Then, well, I would look to council for a short recess.
Motion to recess.
Motion to recess, seconded by Councillor Fagnan. All in favor, please raise your hand.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Opposed, carried. Thank you very much, council. And I will deal with the inquiries of the media at this time. Thank you.